Hello and welcome to an honorable mention of the best games, period. I'm your host, Jack Gardner, and with me this week is nobody. It's just me talking at you for however long I'm going to be talking to you for. Scheduling being what it is, sometimes we can't all get together and record. Funny story, actually. This week, we meant to record two separate episodes, one for the Patreon and one for you guys to listen to today. But on the one hand, Jeremy had to cancel because of something he called a bicycle rodeo. And I have no idea what that is, but I guess it's where kids learn how to ride bikes. Or maybe where Jeremy learns how to ride bikes. I was a little bit unclear about that. But that one didn't get recorded this week. And then Daniel and I tried to get together to record an episode about the game Popo-E-Yo. However, that ended up getting canceled because of frogs. That is right. You heard me say that right. The podcast recording was canceled because of frogs. We were hit with a pestilence of frogs. It was biblical. No. What actually ended up happening was, I guess, Daniel has a neighbor who has a pool, but they haven't cleaned their pool out yet. And so I guess frogs had spawned all over the pool. And so there was just a cacophony of frogs going absolutely nuts. You could actually hear it. It was like taking over his audio. He could not record at all. So that's why you're getting an honorable mention this week. And I just figured I would pull the curtain back a little bit and let you all know kind of what was going on with that, because gosh, you don't get two better excuses for why something didn't happen beyond a plague of frogs and a bicycle rodeo. So those are both real things that actually happened. But anyway, this week, maybe it's a pretty well-known game. I'm not entirely sure. But I would guess that there are a fair number of people out there who have never heard of the game Darkseed. And I figured I'd talk about this game just because Alien Covenant just came out. It's going to be probably a pretty big movie, I'm guessing, regardless of how well it's reviewed, which I haven't been paying close attention, but I've been hearing good things about it. And the reason I wanted to talk about Darkseed is because there's kind of a connection between that and Alien Covenant, and we occasionally like being relevant on this podcast. And so the original movie Alien was famously designed by H.R. Geiger, or at least the original designs for it. I'm sure he had a team of people working under him to get that thing made and look good in the movie. But that's one of his big claims to fame. If you've never heard of H.R. Geiger, he's a big-time surrealist painter, artist, who I think he passed away in 2014. Born in 1940, and he got famous for essentially painting his dreams, and his dreamscapes were, by most people's standards, horrific nightmares. Human beings kind of melded into machinery and monsters and all kinds of just crazy stuff. And honestly, if you have never looked at some of his work, I would highly suggest just Google H.R. Geiger art, and you will see some of the coolest, most detailed renderings of some of the craziest things you could possibly imagine. It's really cool stuff. And so for a while, between like the 1970s until, right up until maybe the late 90s, early 2000s, he was still doing stuff. Like, he was pretty active in the art world, and he directed a number of films. He was doing all kinds of different installations and art pieces and sculpting and painting and all this neat stuff. But probably the biggest thing that he did, well, definitely the biggest thing he did related to video games, he worked with a developer called Cyberdreams. Together, he and Cyberdreams created this adventure game. It originally released for the Amiga, and then made its way to DOS, and then was on the Amiga CD32, and then Mac, and Sega Saturn, and eventually came out on the PlayStation. And so it got ported to all kinds of different systems, and it's actually kind of weird that you can't get it today unless you like buy the copies for those older systems. And if you want it on, I mean, if you want it on like a Sega Saturn or a PlayStation, you're actually going to have to buy the Japanese versions because it was only released in Japan on those consoles. So there's kind of like a weird release history going on. And that's partly due to Cyberdreams actually went under. It's kind of convoluted, but basically they developed Darkseid, and everyone loved Darkseid. It was a really great game. But then they kind of went off course, and they made a few not so well received games, and then as kind of last ditch effort to make something great, they made a Darkseid 2, which I'm not super familiar with. Maybe I'll have to look more into that game, and maybe I'll do an honorable mention about Darkseid 2 someday. The graphics are, better in the second one, as you would imagine, but there's something special about the original Darkseid. That's largely why I wanted to talk about it today. Where do I even start? So, Darkseid released in 1992. I think I've said that already, but it is firmly part of the old school adventure game category. And this is why I'm kind of putting it in an honorable mention, because it is, I would put it as one of the more difficult adventure games out there, simply because there are a number of seemingly minor decisions that you make over the course of playing the game that determine whether or not you are successful. And the game won't tell you screwed up until, a couple hours later. So leaving you kind of scratching your head like, why did this not work? You don't even know if you were on the right track. And so this is kind of one of those games that came out early on in adventure gaming. Well, not even early on in adventure gaming. This is the golden age of adventure games, I guess. This was when people would just pour obscene amounts of time into these adventure games, and they would figure out every little thing that you could do, and they would poke around in it for hours upon hours upon hours. And I don't think that kind of gameplay has aged very well, which is, part of the reason why I bring it up in an honorable mention. That's probably the biggest barrier to entry if you want to go out and try playing Darkseid, is that enormous amount of difficulty in figuring stuff out. And part of that is made more complicated by the fact that everything in Darkseid takes place in real time. So the plot of Darkseid takes place over the course of 3 in-game days. And so from the time your character wakes up until the time they go to bed at 10 p.m. on the dot, the game is running. And so you have a finite amount of time to figure things out. There are tons of events that are very time dependent. And like if you miss the window for certain events, then you can be completely hosed. You can be totally screwed. And you might not even know those events were happening unless you had played the game over and over and over again. So if you plan on playing this, I would suggest getting a guide. No shame in that. Also, so going back just a little bit, it's hard to get your hands on this on a North American version, just because, as far as I know, the companies that made Darkseid have gone under. I don't even know who owns the IP to this anymore. So that's been the major barrier, I guess, to getting it on services like Good Old Games or Steam. And so if you want to get it, I think it's like officially labeled as abandonware, which is when games are just kind of abandoned by their creators. And so you can actually download the files to play the game, and then you can download a program called DOSBox, and DOSBox will allow you to run these old DOS games, hence DOSBox. That comes with its own set of challenges, so it's kind of a pain in the butt to get Darkseid running, but once you do, the game's in real time. But what exactly is it about? The premise of this game is difficult to explain, but also strangely straightforward for how weird everything is. The main character's name is Mike Dawson, and he's just your average dude. He's bought a new house, he's moved in, and I guess the house came complete with tons of creepy furniture and wall hangings, and no one cleaned it, and there's just a bunch of junk all over the place, and Mike Dawson was totally fine with all that for whatever reason. Mike has been having nightmares since he moved into this house, and the game opens up with one of the nightmares he's been having, which involves like a baby being implanted into his skull. It's very disturbing imagery, but then Mike wakes up and everything seems fine. Huh, weird, but he does have a splitting headache. And just to kind of boil everything away, the game is trying to communicate to you that that wasn't actually a nightmare. Mike actually has had an alien embryo implanted inside of his brain. So the goal of the game is to, A, get rid of the alien embryo, the Darkseid, as it were, and B, thwart the plans of a unknowable kind of Lovecraftian alien race known as the Ancients. Their plan is to, they implanted Mike, and that Darkseid will eventually be born at the end of 3 days, and then the child will destroy the world. You, as Mike, have to kind of piece all those things together and figure out how to stop the alien plan. And kind of the catch is that the alien world and the normal world actually exist, as far as I understand it, in like parallel dimensions. And so Mike's house is actually an alien house, alien base, alien structure in their dimension. And so after a certain point, you've reconstructed this mirror, and you can kind of travel between the dark world and the normal world. And the dark world is kind of this hideous, twisted landscape of metal and organic matter, all mishmashed, and tons of weird, creepy imagery. At one point, and by the way, you can die in a ton of different ways throughout Darkseid, and one of my favorites, you actually, or Mike has an alien, literally looks like the xenomorph from Aliens, coming out of his mouth and becoming born. I might be remembering that wrong. That might be the Darkseid being born. Might not. But anyway, it looks cool. And like part of what makes... There's a very unique look to Darkseid, and part of that is due to H.R. Geiger, just like his art being really cool and immersive and different. And part of that is also on the technical side of things, Cyberdreams had to meet H.R. Geiger's minimum demands on the technical level. And basically, for the Amiga, typically graphics were 320 by 200 resolution. But H.R. Geiger was like, no, I'm not going to work in that. You need to up the resolution or I'm out. And so the developers figured out that they could up the resolution to 640 by 350, but then they would have to bring all the colors from 256 to 16. And so that means the game has like this weird, surreal look that isn't really matched by anything else contemporary to it, that are, they're using a lot of other, these colors, a lot of colors. They're using their palettes. Darkseid only has 16 colors to draw from, but the images are strangely of a higher quality. So it's very even I guess you could say even the color scheme and the resolution work together to make things seem a little bit more off and a little bit weirder, which is exactly what this game is going for. When you're in the normal world, you're supposed to have this feeling that everything is off. Something is super wrong, and nothing is quite as it should be. And this game nails that. There are just tons of really weird things. Like, even right off the bat, Mike receives a package in the mail, and it is somebody has sent him a creepy doll. But he opens the package, and for a split second he sees like this weird fetus heart bomb thing. That's one of the things that makes H.R. Geiger, like, his art just fascinating, is it's almost impossible to just describe what things are, because then you get descriptions like fetus heart bomb thing, which might not be the most helpful way to describe something, but that's kind of what it looks like. So, and there are just some other kind of fun things about Darkseed that just kind of make it seem a little weird. So, for example, Mike Dawson is actually based off of the real-life lead game designer on Darkseed, who was named Mike Dawson, who actually had his image used as the main sprite, the main model for Mike Dawson. So Mike Dawson is actually Mike Dawson in Darkseed. I'm not sure exactly if that's meant to be like hubris or like an artistic statement or what, because usually you don't have the lead game designer inserting themselves into a game, but that's just how it is. So you have kind of these artistic renderings, but then the protagonist is like a moving photo of a person. It's very jarring and uncomfortable, but cool. And again, the big drawback from this game is that it takes place over the course of 3 in-game days, and at any given point, you can screw up something that will get you killed. You know, maybe you screw up something on the first day, that'll get you killed on the second or third day. In fact, I think there are a couple of, if you make a couple of decisions, you can actually just wind up getting stuck, and then time will run, just the clock will run out, and then you'll get a game over because you didn't know you had to do that one thing. Oh, you used that invisibility band and in the wrong place, and now you're just completely screwed. It has that old school mentality that's a tough nut to crack, especially in a day and age where we have like 50 amazing games coming out at any given time, at least in 2017. I think it's worth noting that the box cover for Darkseed actually uses a painting done by Geiger called, it's pretty famous, it's called Lee 2, and it is a painting of a woman he had once had a relationship with named Lee Tobler. She was relatively famous, a famous artist in Switzerland who, while they were together, committed suicide. And she you can go and look at Geiger's work and you can see her face kind of coming up time and time again, especially early on. Yeah, it's interesting that a painting of her serves as the box art and also as a prominent character in the game. Not really sure what to make of that, but make of it what you will. It's overall, Darkseed is just very, it gets in your head and under your skin. Like I said, consider playing this game with a guide. I would very much recommend that. But I'd also recommend giving it, maybe give it some shots without a guide first. Because part of what makes this game an adventure game is not knowing what you're supposed to do and figuring it out. And, in today's day and age, I realize not a ton of people have time for that or the patience for that. I mean, I certainly don't. So I'm not trying to hold you guys to higher standards or anything like that. But, allow yourself to feel some of that trial and failure and excitement of figuring it out for yourself. And then turn to the guide when you really run into a brick wall. And that's assuming even you want to go through all the trouble of downloading it. I would recommend, if you really don't want to have to deal with all of that fiddling, look up a Let's Play of this game. And I would almost never ever recommend that for any game. But this game is a pain in the butt to actually download and get working. So if you don't want to fiddle with that, and you want to experience what this is like, or just see Geiger's artwork in a game, or get a sense of what Darkseid is like, while we're all waiting for it to come out on Good Old Games, it probably will eventually, sometime, maybe. Give a Let's Play a look, because honestly, this type of adventure game is we're probably not going to see many or any games like this ever come out again, just because of how technology has progressed, how game design has progressed. There are plenty of adventure games that have been kickstarted and are coming out, but if you go back in time to the early 90s, these weren't just a super niche market. These were huge. Adventure games were one of the mainstays of gaming. And now there's only recently been a resurgence of that, but it's been oriented more towards stuff like Telltale and the Walking Dead series of games that they put out, or The Odd Gentleman. I think that's the name of their studio, who are doing the King's Quest, the modern King's Quest incarnation. And I think that's kind of more the direction that modern adventure games are going to take, just because they're so much more accessible than something like Darkseid. That being said, I think there is a lot to be said for stuff like Darkseid. So, go out, if you are one of those technically minded people, download it, give it a shot, see what it's all about. Maybe grab a guide on the internet and kind of figure out what you're supposed to be doing, because it can get complicated real fast. And if you're not, just go out, watch someone else play it who kind of knows the ropes already, because there is something just fascinating about watching someone play an adventure game that they know really well, and they can explain all of the ins and outs to you. Again, I would almost never recommend watching a Let's Play as a substitute for actually playing the game. But in Darkseid's case, it's kind of an exception, I would say. So, yeah, it's, that's my honorable mention. I admire it as an adventure game. I think it is incredibly interesting. All that being said, I don't think it's aged very well, especially with how demanding it is, with its real-time system. So it's an honorable mention for me. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a best game, period. It is certainly one of the best early horror games in video game history. But all that aside, I think it has some fantastic artwork, some great ideas. Just check it out. However you can, however you feel inclined, just check it out. And with that being said, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Extra Life, If you haven't heard about Extra Life before, it's an awesome gaming charity. Basically, people from all across the United States and Canada can get together, play games with their friends, and raise money for sick and injured kids in Children's Miracle Network hospitals all across the United States and Canada. And even better than all of that, which already is a win-win, you can actually... Each person who signs up can actually choose which Children's Miracle Network hospital they want to support, and 100% of everything they raise goes directly to that hospital. So nothing is cut out. It's all going to the hospital. You know where it's going, 100% of it. It's all helping kids. That's amazing. That's wonderful. So head over to extra-life.org to learn more. You can also check out community.extra-life.org to learn more about kind of the Extra Life community and, see interesting articles or listen to this very podcast, which we post there. We also post it on Game Informer, and you can find it on SoundCloud. iTunes. We have a Patreon that, if you want to throw us $1 a month, that just kind of helps pay for our costs associated with creating a podcast and hosting it and all that jazz. And if you throw $1 our way, you get fun little extras, side conversations we have that have to get cut out of episodes, and also just sometimes we just put full episodes up on there too. So check that out if you feel inclined. And I think that's about it. I think next week we're going to be talking about Papoillo. I think I mentioned that at the top of the show, but I think and I don't want to make you wait another week for the poll results, so I'm just going to say that shockingly it was very, very, very close. Twitter actually overwhelmingly voted no on Soul Calibur being a best game, period. Blew away the yeses. On the other hand, Facebook totally blew away the no's. So it ended up being relatively close, with yes just barely squeaking by with a handful of votes. So welcome Soul Calibur to being one of the best games, period. Thank you, Harold Goldberg, for coming on the show and nominating it. The people had your back this week. So next week, look forward to us talking about Papoillo, and I'll see you on the flippity dippity.